11:47 p.m. She's writing love letters to her new husband. 11:52 p.m. He's asking her the question that changes everything. 12:15 a.m. She's fighting for her life. 2:38 a.m. She's gone. For hours. That's how long it took for the happiest day of her life to become her last. This is the story of how tradition, jealousy, and deadly pride destroyed two families in a single night. Welcome back to True Crime Family Corner, where we dive deep into the cases that shake us to our core. I'm so grateful to have you here with me today, you incredible souls who seek truth, who demand justice, and who never look away from the hard stories that need to be told. Tonight, I'm bringing you a case that will haunt your dreams and make you question everything you think you know about love, honor, and the deadly price of honesty. Family, if you're new here, smash that subscribe button right now because stories like this, raw, real, and absolutely devastating, are what we do here. And trust me, you're going to want to stay until the very end of this one, because the truth about what happened in that hotel room will leave you speechless. It was a warm spring evening in Los Angeles when two families came together to celebrate what they thought would be a beautiful beginning. But what started as joy would end in unspeakable tragedy, leaving everyone asking how love could turn so deadly so fast. Sarah Martinez was 26 years old and had spent her whole life in sunny California. Born to a family that balanced faith with freedom, she grew up believing she could honor her roots while still living her own life. Sarah was creative and independent. She had studied graphic design at university and ran her own small business while helping her parents with their catering company. Her friends loved her warm heart and artistic spirit. She was the kind of person who could bring different worlds together, someone who respected tradition but wasn't afraid to think for herself. Then there was Rashid Hassan, 30 years old and originally from the Middle East. He had come to America 8 years earlier, first as a student, then as a working engineer. Rashid came from a very traditional family where certain beliefs ran deep, especially about how women should behave and what made a good wife. His parents had tried to arrange a marriage for him back home, but it fell through before he moved to the States. When he met Sarah at a community gathering, he was immediately drawn to her beauty and confidence. The two families spent months getting to know each other. Fatima and Omar talked regularly, always with family watching, as was proper in their tradition. Both families eventually agreed to an engagement, and a wedding date was set for the following year. During their engagement, Fatima and Omar kept their relationship respectful and traditional. They spent time together but avoided physical closeness, following both religious rules and family expectations. But beneath the surface, there were differences that no one wanted to address. Fatima's parents were flexible and supportive of her independence. They wanted her to be happy and make her own choices. Omar's family, however, had very strong opinions about how a proper wife should act. They believed in old-fashioned values that left little room for a woman's past or personal freedom. Despite these warning signs, both families pushed forward with the wedding plans. And family, if you're feeling that chill down your spine right now, hit that like button because you know something terrible is coming. The signs were all there, weren't they? The wedding day itself was beautiful. Fatima wore a stunning white dress with a traditional head covering, while Omar looked handsome in his formal suit. The venue was simple but elegant, filled with flowers and soft lighting that made everything feel magical. Friends and family from both sides filled the room, and for most of the day, everything seemed perfect. Fatima and Omar held hands during their vows, exchanging smiles and whispering sweet words to each other. Fatima's friends couldn't stop talking about how radiant she looked, how happy she seemed. Omar, though quieter than usual, appeared calm and respectful throughout the ceremony. After they were officially married, everyone enjoyed dinner and dancing. Pictures were taken, blessings were given, and many guests commented on what a happy couple they made. But family, here's where I need you to pay close attention, because what happens next will change everything forever. Later that evening, the newlyweds checked into a luxurious hotel suite in downtown Los Angeles for their first night as husband and wife. It was meant to be the most romantic and special moment of their lives together. Fatima had prepared carefully for this night. She had bought beautiful new clothes, her favorite perfume, and had even written a heartfelt letter to Omar expressing all her hopes and dreams for their marriage. What neither of them knew was that this night would not unfold as anyone had planned. Hidden doubts and unspoken expectations that had been buried throughout their relationship were about to explode to the surface. One simple conversation, one honest answer, would turn their peaceful wedding night into a nightmare that would destroy both their families forever. After the wedding celebrations ended and they were finally alone, Fatima changed into a beautiful silk nightgown and gave Omar the handwritten letter she had prepared with so much love. In the letter, she poured out her heart, talking about how much she loved him, how excited she was to build an equal partnership with him, and how much she looked forward to creating a wonderful future together. Omar read the letter quietly, but something seemed wrong. He didn't smile or say anything romantic back. Instead, he just sat on the edge of the bed, staring down at the floor with a troubled expression. When Fatima asked if something was bothering him, he simply said he was tired and didn't want to talk. Trying to lighten the mood and make their first night special, Fatima walked over to sit beside him. She gently took his hand and told him how happy she was to finally be his wife. But instead of the loving response she expected, Omar pulled his hand away and looked at her with cold, serious eyes. Then he asked the question that would change everything. "Are you still a virgin?" Family, I need you to pause and think about this moment. Here's a woman who just married the love of her life, wearing her wedding nightgown, holding on to dreams of a beautiful future. And those 5 words, those 5 devastating words, were about to destroy everything. The words hit Fatima like a punch to the stomach. She sat there in shock, not knowing how to respond. This wasn't the romantic conversation she had imagined for their wedding night. After a long, uncomfortable silence, she tried to handle it calmly. "Omar, I don't think that question matters anymore," she said softly. "We're married now. We should focus on building trust together, not testing each other." But Omar wasn't satisfied with that answer. His voice became harder, more demanding. "Just answer me. I need to know the truth." Fatima took a deep breath. She knew that being honest might upset him, but she also believed that their marriage should be built on truth, not lies. Looking him in the eyes, she quietly admitted that no, she wasn't a virgin. The change in Omar was immediate and terrifying. His face twisted with anger and disgust. He jumped up from the bed and started pacing around the room like a caged animal, his hands clenched into fists. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it right now because this is about to get so much darker, and you need to be part of our true crime family to hear how this story ends. "How could you do this to me?" he shouted. "How could you let me marry you knowing you had given yourself to another man? Do you have any idea how this makes me look? What will my family think?" Fatima stood up too, trying to stay calm even though her heart was pounding with fear. "I never lied to you, Omar," she said firmly. "You never asked me this question before tonight, and I never pretended to be someone I wasn't. I am still the same person you fell in love with and asked to marry." But her words only made him angrier. He began shouting about betrayal and shame, about how she had ruined everything. Fatima could see that reasoning with him wasn't working. She became frightened and tried to leave the room, reaching for her phone to call for help. That's when Omar completely lost control. He grabbed her arm roughly and pushed her away from the door. The situation quickly turned violent as his rage took over completely. Fatima tried to fight back, but she was no match for his strength and fury. In that hotel suite, what should have been a place of love and intimacy became the scene of a brutal crime driven by anger and twisted beliefs about a woman's worth. No one was there to help her. No one could hear her cries. The night that was supposed to be the beginning of their beautiful life together became the end of Fatima's life entirely. Fatima Al-Zahra was found dead in that hotel room at 2:38 in the morning. The paramedics said she died from severe head injuries and strangulation. A crime scene investigation started immediately, and the entire hotel was closed off to everyone except police. News of the murder spread quickly to both families. Fatima's parents were completely destroyed. They had just been celebrating their daughter's wedding a few hours earlier, and now they faced every parent's worst nightmare. Her mother fainted when she heard the news, and her father had to be rushed to the hospital because the shock caused him to have a panic attack. Omar's family was also devastated, but in a different way. They couldn't believe that their son, who they saw as quiet and respectful, could have done something so terrible. Some of them even wondered if Fatima had somehow provoked him, showing how deep their traditional beliefs really ran. Omar ibn Khalid himself was found still in the hotel room when police arrived. He had made no attempt to run away or call for help. He was arrested immediately and taken to the downtown Los Angeles jail, where he was put on suicide watch because officials were worried he might hurt himself. During the first police questioning, Omar refused to say anything without a lawyer present. His silence continued for days, which frustrated investigators who were trying to understand exactly what had happened in that room. Meanwhile, Fatima's friends and co-workers flooded social media with messages of shock and sadness. Many of them had known Fatima as a kind, independent woman who was passionate about her art and her dreams. They couldn't believe that someone so full of life was gone, and certainly not like this. The case quickly drew attention from the news media, women's rights activists, and members of the local Muslim community. Some came to support Fatima's family, while others worried about how this tragedy might make their entire community look bad. In the days that followed, police and prosecutors worked hard to build a complete picture of what had happened. They interviewed hotel staff, read through text messages between Fatima and Omar, and collected statements from everyone who had been at the wedding. One important discovery was a voice message Fatima had sent to a close friend just days before the wedding, expressing her nervousness about Omar's traditional beliefs and how they might affect their marriage. Even so, she had hoped that love and time would help them understand each other better. Omar's defense team began preparing their strategy, focusing on cultural pressure, mental breakdown, and emotional distress. They planned to argue that Omar had suffered a psychological collapse when he learned information that completely clashed with his deeply held beliefs about marriage and women. Family, I want to pause here for a moment because this case is hitting me hard, and I know it's hitting you too. If this story is affecting you, please know that you're not alone. That's what makes our true crime family so special. We face these difficult truths together. The prosecution, on the other hand, saw this as a clear case of murder driven by control and rage. They argued that Omar's rigid mindset made him dangerous, and that his beliefs about women's purity had created a situation where violence became inevitable. Fatima's funeral was held in her hometown, attended by hundreds of people from across the community. The service was peaceful and beautiful, filled with prayers, flowers, and moments of silence. Many speakers, including Fatima's university professors and childhood friends, described her as someone who built bridges between different cultures, a person who stood for compassion and creativity. The case became a symbol for many larger issues in immigrant communities, where the pressure of maintaining honor and reputation can sometimes create hidden dangers. By the time the trial was ready to begin, over 40 witnesses were listed to testify, including hotel staff, family members, cultural experts, and psychologists. The prosecutors were determined to seek the maximum penalty possible, while the defense hoped to avoid a life sentence by arguing that Omar's mental state was compromised. Though Omar had not spoken publicly about what happened, his continued silence had already begun to shape how people viewed the case. When the trial finally began months later, it became a focal point for discussions about domestic violence, cultural expectations, and the challenges faced by immigrant communities trying to balance old traditions with new realities. And family, this is where things get really intense. If you're still with me, and I hope you are because your support means everything, then you know we're about to dive into the courtroom drama that would determine Omar's fate. From the very beginning, the prosecution made it crystal clear that they intended to prove this was premeditated murder, not a crime of passion. The lead prosecutor, an experienced attorney named Carlos Rivera, opened with a powerful statement that set the tone for the entire case. "This is not a crime of passion," he told the jury firmly. "This is not an accident or a moment of temporary insanity. This is a deliberate act rooted in control, unrealistic expectations, and pure rage against a woman who dared to be honest with her husband." The prosecution's first witnesses included hotel employees and forensic experts who painted a detailed picture of what had happened in that room. One hotel worker testified that she had heard sounds of a struggle coming from the suite, including what sounded like furniture being knocked over and a woman's voice calling for help. The forensic evidence was particularly damning. Fatima's broken fingernails, torn nightgown, and defensive wounds on her arms showed clearly that she had fought desperately for her life. Photographs of the crime scene were shown to the jury, though the judge was careful to limit the most graphic images out of respect for Fatima's dignity and her family's pain. Next, Fatima's closest friends took the witness stand to testify about her state of mind before the wedding. They described her excitement about getting married, but also her growing anxiety about Omar's strong traditional views and how they might affect their relationship. Her best friend, a woman named Zainab Ahmed, gave particularly emotional testimony. "Fatima told me she was worried," Zainab said, fighting back tears. She said Omar sometimes made comments about how women should behave that made her uncomfortable. But she loved him and thought she could help him see that women in America could be both respectful and independent. The defense team, however, took a completely different approach. Their argument centered on emotional distress and what they called cultural trauma. They claimed that Omar had experienced a severe psychological breakdown after discovering that Fatima was not a virgin, something that, in his traditional worldview, was absolutely essential for a proper marriage. A clinical psychologist hired by the defense testified that Omar suffered from something called cultural dissociative shock, triggered by a violent clash between his traditional expectations and the modern reality he encountered. They argued that this emotional state had clouded his judgment and made him unable to control his actions. "My client did not plan to hurt anyone," his defense attorney argued. "He was a man caught between two worlds, and when those worlds collided, he experienced a mental break that made him temporarily unable to think rationally." When Omar finally took the witness stand to testify in his own defense, the courtroom was packed with people eager to hear his side of the story. Speaking in a quiet voice, he admitted to killing Fatima, but claimed it happened during a moment when he completely lost control of himself. "When she told me the truth," he said, barely looking up from his hands, "I felt like my whole world was falling apart. Everything I had believed about marriage, about honor, about what was right and wrong, it all crumbled in that moment. I lost control completely. I felt betrayed beyond anything I had ever experienced, and I acted without thinking about the consequences. D was falling apart. Everything I had believed about marriage, about honor, about what was right and wrong, it all crumbled in that moment. I lost control completely. I felt betrayed beyond anything I had ever experienced, and I acted without thinking about the consequences." The prosecutor pressed him hard during cross-examination. "So because your expectations were not met, you decided that violence was the answer? That was your solution to feeling disappointed?" Omar said nothing at first, then whispered, "I regret it every single second of every day." But the prosecution used his own testimony against him brilliantly. They revealed previous text messages Omar had sent to a male cousin about a year before the wedding, in which he had written, "If a woman lies about her purity, she is not worth marrying. A man has the right to know what kind of woman he is getting. Family, when I tell you the courtroom went silent, I mean you could hear a pin drop." These messages proved this wasn't a sudden breakdown. This was a man with dangerous beliefs about women. These messages showed that Omar's reaction was not a sudden psychological break, but rather the result of long-held beliefs about women and their value. The prosecutor reminded the jury that Fatima's past had not caused her death. Omar's decision to respond with violence had. Fatima al-Zahra was honest when asked a direct question. The prosecutor said in his closing argument, "She was brave enough to tell the truth to the man she loved. She wanted to build a future based on honesty and mutual respect. And for that honesty, for that bravery, she paid with her life." The defense made one final plea to the jury, urging them to consider Omar's emotional state and arguing for a lesser charge of manslaughter instead of first-degree murder. They painted him as a victim of cultural confusion rather than a cold-blooded killer. After 3 long days of deliberation, the jury returned to the courtroom with their decision. The room fell completely silent as the jury foreman stood up and delivered the verdict that would determine Omar's fate. "We find the defendant, Omar ibn Khalid, guilty of first-degree murder." If you've been following this journey with me, family, please hit that like button because justice for Fatima was finally within reach. But the story wasn't over yet. The conviction carried a sentence of life in prison, but the judge still had some discretion in determining whether Rashid would ever be eligible for parole. During the sentencing hearing, both sides made their final arguments about what punishment would be appropriate. The prosecution pushed for life in prison without any possibility of parole, arguing that Rashid's lack of remorse during the actual crime and his failure to seek help for Sarah showed a disturbing level of calculated intent. They painted him as someone who had made a deliberate choice to value his own pride over his wife's life. The defense submitted a plea for mercy. While they did not dispute the guilty verdict, they asked the court to consider Rashid's previously clean criminal record, the absence of any history of violence, and their belief that cultural conflict and psychological pressure had contributed to his actions. During the victim impact portion of the hearing, Sarah's family was given the chance to address the court and talk about how her death had affected their lives. Her mother, barely able to speak through her tears, described the pain that her family endured every single day. "Sarah was our light," she said, her voice breaking. "She was kind, creative, and full of dreams. She never hurt anyone in her entire life. She was a bridge between cultures, someone who believed that love could overcome any difference. What happened to her should never happen to anyone, anywhere." Fatima's father spoke next, describing the emptiness that now filled their home and the guilt he felt for trusting Omar and his family. "I don't want revenge," he said firmly. "I want justice. My daughter's life cannot be measured in years or months, but whatever punishment this court decides should reflect the precious life that was lost." After hearing all the statements, the judge addressed the packed courtroom. She explained the seriousness of the crime and the factors she had considered in making her decision about sentencing. "This case represents a tragic collision between traditional beliefs and modern life," Judge Patricia Davis said. "While the court recognizes that cultural differences can create stress and confusion, nothing, absolutely nothing, justifies taking another person's life." Fatima Al-Zahra trusted the defendant with her life, her future, and her happiness. He repaid that trust with violence and murder. Judge Davis sentenced Omar ibn Khalid to 18 years to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving the minimum term. She denied the defense's request for a reduced sentence or alternative rehabilitation programs, stating that the brutal nature of the crime demanded full accountability. Omar remained silent during the sentencing. He nodded once when the sentence was read aloud, but made no statement of apology or remorse to Fatima's family. Following the sentencing, he was transferred to a California state prison facility outside of Los Angeles to begin serving his time. After the trial was over, Fatima's mother, who had remained mostly quiet throughout the legal process, finally spoke to the public about her daughter and what she hoped people would learn from this tragedy. "My daughter believed in love and trust," she said at a press conference outside the courthouse. She believed that people from different backgrounds could understand one another and build beautiful lives together. "We cannot bring Fatima back, but we can tell her story so that other young women might be protected from this kind of violence." Family, we're coming to the end of this heartbreaking story, but before we do, I need you to know how much your support means. If this case has touched you the way it's touched me, please consider subscribing and sharing this with someone who needs to hear Fatima's story. In the weeks following the trial, several women's rights organizations reached out to Fatima's family about starting a foundation in her name. The foundation would focus on supporting women in traditional communities who might face pressure, isolation, or abuse because of cultural expectations about their behavior or their past. The family agreed to this idea, wanting to turn their devastating loss into something that could help other people. They hoped that Fatima's story could start important conversations about respect, communication, and safety in relationships, especially in communities where women might feel pressured to meet impossible standards. Fatima's tragic death became more than just a single crime. It became a symbol of the complex challenges that many people face when they try to live between different cultural values and expectations. Her story brought attention to the importance of emotional safety in relationships, especially in communities where women may feel pressure to be perfect without being given space for honest communication. Her friends and family used her memory to promote conversations about trust, respect, and the need to build relationships on understanding rather than rigid expectations. They organized workshops and support groups focused on helping people navigate the balance between honoring cultural traditions and living authentically in modern society. The case also sparked important discussions within immigrant communities about the responsibility that comes with adapting to a new culture. Some community leaders used Omar's actions as an example of the failure to adapt properly to American values, calling for better cultural education and support for newcomers. Others emphasized that deeply held beliefs, no matter how traditional or important they might seem, should never be used to justify violence against another person. Religious leaders from various faiths spoke out about the importance of holding people fully accountable for their actions, regardless of their cultural background or personal struggles. In the media and on social platforms, Fatima's face became a powerful symbol representing many different things: strength in the face of pressure, the vulnerability of women in traditional societies, and the hope that love and understanding can overcome cultural differences. Her story was eventually covered in documentaries, news specials, and magazine articles. People from many different backgrounds, Muslim and non-Muslim, immigrant and native-born, connected with her story because it touched on universal themes like love, betrayal, expectation, and the search for justice. For Fatima's parents, nothing could ever bring their beloved daughter back or fill the empty space she left in their hearts. But they found some measure of peace in knowing that her story was helping other people think more carefully about respect, communication, and safety in their own relationships. The case continued to spark discussion and debate long after Omar began serving his prison sentence. Some people struggled to understand how a man who had seemed quiet and respectful could have committed such a brutal crime. Family members and friends from both sides said they still had trouble comprehending what had gone wrong, and how someone with so much potential had ended up in a prison cell for a crime that could have been prevented with empathy, honest communication, or simply walking away. Fatima's story serves as a powerful reminder that love alone is not enough to make a marriage work. Respect, honesty, open communication, and mutual understanding must also be present for a relationship to be truly safe and healthy. When these essential elements are missing, and when old beliefs and expectations go unquestioned and unchallenged, even what should be the safest relationship can become dangerous. The tragedy of Fatima al-Zahra shows us that cultural differences don't have to lead to violence, but they do require patience, understanding, and a willingness to put love and respect above pride and tradition. Her memory continues to inspire people to build better, safer relationships based on truth, equality, and genuine care for one another. Family, thank you for taking this difficult journey with me today. Stories like Fatima's aren't easy to tell or hear, but they're so important because they remind us that behind every headline is a real person with dreams, hopes, and people who love them deeply. If this story has affected you, please don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because this is what our true crime family is all about: seeking truth, demanding justice, and never forgetting the victims whose stories need to be told. Remember, love should never hurt. Tradition should never justify violence, and honesty should never cost someone their life. Until next time, family, stay safe, stay strong, and keep fighting for justice. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a story from our True Crime Family Corner. Your support helps me continue bringing these important stories to light, and together, we make sure that victims like Fatima are never forgotten.